Imagine it is 2 in the morning. You are sleeping deeply when you wake up because you need to urinate. You get out of bed, walk to the bathroom, return to bed, and hope that was the last interruption. But a few hours later, it happens again. Then again. If you are over 60, you may have told yourself, this is just aging. And sometimes, age is part of the explanation. The prostate naturally changes as men get older. For some men, it gradually becomes enlarged and can affect the flow of urine. But nighttime urination is not caused by the prostate alone. Fluids before bed, certain medications, bladder problems, diabetes, sleep disorders, and other conditions can also play a role. That distinction matters. Because when a symptom becomes common, we can make the mistake of assuming it is normal. A man may notice that his urine stream is weaker, that he has to wait before urinating, or that he is getting up several times every night. Instead of mentioning it to his doctor, he adjusts his routine and carries on. But your body is giving you information, and information is worth paying attention to. Now, this does not mean you should panic. Frequent urination does not mean prostate cancer, and many prostate changes are benign, meaning they are not cancerous. The important point is that persistent or worsening symptoms deserve proper evaluation, so you know what is causing them. And this brings us to a simple question. Could something you might already have in your kitchen fit into a broader approach to healthy aging and prostate support? One food that has attracted attention is the walnut. Walnuts are not a prostate medicine. They cannot diagnose a prostate problem, shrink an enlarged prostate, or guarantee protection from cancer. But they contain healthy, unsaturated fats, plant compounds, fiber, and other nutrients that make them interesting as part of a healthy eating pattern. And there is a twist here. The most interesting reason walnuts may be worth discussing may not be a direct effect on the prostate. It may have more to do with the environment inside your body, the factors connected with cardiovascular health, metabolism, inflammation, and healthy aging. That is where this conversation becomes much more useful. So rather than asking, what miracle food fixes the prostate? A better question is, what daily choices may help support the kind of health that allows a man to age well? And before we talk more about the walnut, we need to understand what is happening inside the prostate as a man gets older. If you want to understand why prostate problems become more common after 60, it helps to first understand what the prostate actually is. The prostate is a gland located just below the bladder. One of its main jobs is to help produce fluid that becomes part of semen. But its location is important because the prostate surrounds part of the urethra, the tube that carries urine from the bladder out of the body. Think of it like a garden hose. Imagine water flowing smoothly through a hose. Now imagine someone gradually squeezing the hose near the outlet. At first, you may barely notice a difference. But as that squeezing increases, the water may come out more slowly, and you may need to apply more pressure to get the same flow. Something similar can happen when the prostate becomes enlarged. This condition is commonly called benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH. Benign means it is not cancer, and hyperplasia simply means the number of cells has increased, causing the tissue to grow. BPH becomes more common as men age, although the amount of enlargement and the symptoms can vary from one man to another. And this is an important point. An enlarged prostate does not automatically mean prostate cancer. They are different conditions. BPH is a non-cancerous growth of prostate tissue. Prostate cancer involves abnormal cancer cells that can behave differently and may require testing and treatment. A man can have BPH without having cancer, and he can also have prostate cancer without having obvious urinary symptoms. So why might an older man notice changes in urination? As the prostate enlarges, it can narrow the urethra and make it harder for the bladder to empty efficiently. The bladder may become more sensitive over time. That can contribute to symptoms such as a weaker stream, difficulty getting started, stopping and starting during urination, or feeling that you still need to go after finishing. Nighttime urination can be frustrating, but again, the prostate is not always the whole story. Drinking a lot of fluid late in the evening, certain medications, changes in bladder function, diabetes, sleep problems, and other health conditions can all affect how often you urinate. Poor sleep can create a confusing cycle. You wake up for another reason, notice your bladder, and assume the bladder caused the awakening. That is why persistent changes should not be dismissed as getting older. Understanding the cause gives you options. Sometimes the answer involves lifestyle changes. Sometimes medication is appropriate. Sometimes medical evaluation is needed. And this matters for our discussion about walnuts, because your prostate is not an isolated organ. It exists within a system involving your heart, blood vessels, metabolism, inflammation, and health. Now here's where nutrition becomes interesting, because the prostate does not operate in isolation from the rest of the body. Here is where the story gets more interesting. When men think about prostate health, they often imagine the prostate as a completely separate part of the body, almost like a machine that eventually wears out. But your body does not work that way. Your organs, hormones, blood vessels, muscles, metabolism, and immune system are constantly communicating with one another. What happens in one part of your body can exist alongside changes happening elsewhere. That does not mean poor heart health automatically causes prostate disease, or that improving your metabolism will prevent every prostate problem. Medicine is rarely that simple. But researchers increasingly recognize that healthy aging depends on looking at the whole picture. Consider metabolic health. In simple terms, metabolic health describes how well your body handles things such as blood sugar, insulin, blood fats, and energy. As we get older, maintaining healthy body composition, staying physically active, and eating a nutrient-rich diet become increasingly important. Now think about chronic inflammation. Inflammation is not always bad. In fact, it is one of your body's natural defense systems. If you cut your finger, inflammation helps begin the repair process. The problem can arise when inflammatory activity remains elevated for long periods. You can think of it as leaving a small warning light switched on for too long. It does not necessarily create one specific disease by itself, but persistent inflammation can contribute to an environment associated with several chronic health problems. Then there is oxidative stress. Imagine the metal parts of a machine slowly experiencing wear and tear over many years. Your body also produces molecules that can contribute to cellular damage, while your antioxidant systems work to keep that process under control. This balance matters. And there is another factor men over 60 should pay attention to: abdominal fat. Carrying excess fat around the waist is not simply a cosmetic concern. Fat tissue is biologically active. Excess abdominal fat is associated with metabolic changes and can influence inflammatory signaling throughout the body. That is one reason maintaining a healthy weight, moving regularly, and protecting cardiovascular health can be so valuable as you age. Your heart and blood vessels also deserve attention. Good cardiovascular health helps support circulation, physical activity, brain health, and independence. And the habits that protect your heart, such as regular exercise, nutritious foods, adequate sleep, and avoiding tobacco, often support many other aspects of healthy aging at the same time. This is why I want you to think beyond the idea of a single superfood. One food rarely transforms your health by itself. What matters much more is the pattern created by your everyday choices. And this is where walnuts become particularly interesting. They contain unsaturated fats, plant compounds, fiber, and other nutrients that can fit into a heart-conscious, nutrient-dense eating pattern. The question is not whether walnuts are a miracle cure. The better question is what these nutrients may contribute to when they become part of an overall healthy lifestyle. And this is where our ordinary-looking nut starts to become much more interesting. So, what exactly makes the walnut worth our attention? At first glance, it does not look particularly impressive. It is small, wrinkled, and easy to overlook in a grocery store. But inside that shell is a combination of nutrients that makes walnuts different from many ordinary snack foods. One of the first things to understand is that walnuts contain mostly unsaturated fats. These are often considered healthier fats, particularly when they replace sources of saturated fat in the diet. Walnuts also contain a plant-based omega-3 fat called ALA, or alpha-linolenic acid. You do not need to remember the name. Think of ALA simply as a type of essential fat your body needs but cannot produce in sufficient amounts on its own, so you need to obtain it from food. And walnuts provide more than fat. They contain fiber, minerals, protein, and a variety of plant compounds called polyphenols. Polyphenols are naturally occurring substances found in many plant foods. Researchers are interested in them because some have antioxidant and other biological properties. Now, there is an important distinction here. Having these nutrients does not mean a walnut acts like a medication. A food can support normal nutrition without treating a disease. That difference is especially important when we are talking about prostate health. You may see dramatic claims online suggesting that a particular food can clean out the prostate, shrink it, or prevent cancer. Those statements can sound convincing, but they go far beyond what the evidence allows us to say. There's another reason walnuts can be useful: what they replace. Imagine two men. The first man reaches for a small portion of walnuts when he is hungry in the afternoon. The second reaches for a highly processed snack loaded with refined carbohydrates, added sugar, or excess sodium. If the first man is replacing a less nutritious snack with walnuts, he is changing the overall quality of his diet. But if he simply adds several handfuls of walnuts on top of everything else he already eats, he has added a significant amount of energy to his diet. Walnuts are nutritious, but they are also calorie-dense. That means portion size still matters. This is a common misunderstanding about healthy foods. Healthy does not mean unlimited. Whole walnuts also differ from many packaged nut products. A plain or minimally processed walnut is very different from a snack coated in sugar, candy-like flavoring, or large amounts of salt. So the real advantage is not some magical ingredient hidden inside a walnut. It is the combination of nutrients, the way walnuts can fit into an overall healthy dietary pattern, and the possibility of using them to replace less nutritious foods. But does having these nutrients actually mean walnuts protect the prostate? That question is where we need to slow down and separate promising science from internet hype. Now we reach the part that matters most. What does the science actually tell us? Because when a food becomes popular online, the original research can quickly get turned into a much bigger claim. A study finds something interesting, a headline simplifies it, and suddenly a nutritious food is being presented as if it were a treatment. That is not how good medical evidence works. There are several levels of research. Scientists may begin with laboratory studies, where individual cells or biological processes are examined. These experiments can help researchers understand possible mechanisms, but they cannot tell us exactly what will happen when a person eats a particular food. Animal studies can provide another piece of information. They can help scientists investigate biological pathways that would be difficult to study initially in humans. But an effect seen in an animal does not automatically mean the same effect occurs in people. Then there are observational studies. These follow groups of people and look for patterns. Researchers might find that people who regularly eat nuts have certain health characteristics that differ from people who rarely eat them. That can be interesting, but an association is not proof of cause and effect. Perhaps people who eat more nuts also exercise more, smoke less, eat more vegetables, or have better overall diets. Researchers can adjust for some of these factors, but it is difficult to account perfectly for every difference between people. Clinical trials can provide stronger evidence because researchers can control more of what happens and compare groups over time. Even then, the quality of the trial, its size, duration, and specific outcome all matter. So where does that leave walnuts and the prostate? The evidence supporting nuts as part of a healthy dietary pattern is much stronger for areas such as cardiovascular and metabolic health than for proving that walnuts specifically prevent prostate disease. We cannot honestly make those promises. That may sound less exciting than a miracle claim, but it is actually more useful. Because when you understand what a food can realistically do, you can use it wisely without expecting it to do something it cannot. And there is another reason walnuts may be worth considering, but it has less to do with the prostate itself and more to do with what happens to the rest of your body after 60. Let's look at that connection next. Here is the bigger picture I want you to see. If you are over 60, the goal should not be to find one food that protects one organ. The goal is to create an internal environment that supports your health as you age, and that is where nutrient-dense foods, including walnuts, can have a useful place. For example, walnuts contain predominantly unsaturated fats. When these healthier fats replace less beneficial sources of fat in your diet, they can fit into an eating pattern that supports cardiovascular health. Why does that matter for a man concerned about his prostate? Fiber helps support normal digestion and can contribute to a more satisfying meal. That matters because feeling satisfied after eating can make it easier to avoid constantly reaching for highly processed snacks. And this brings us to one of the most important ideas in nutrition: substitution. Imagine you normally eat cookies every afternoon. You decide to replace that habit with a modest portion of walnuts and perhaps some fruit. You have not simply added walnuts to your existing diet. You have changed the quality of the food you are choosing. That is very different from eating your usual cookies, desserts, large meals, and snacks, and then adding several handfuls of walnuts because you heard they are healthy. Walnuts contain valuable nutrients, but they are also energy-dense. more is not automatically better. This is why I prefer to think about food in terms of patterns rather than isolated ingredients. A healthy aging pattern might include vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, quality protein sources, nuts, and other minimally processed foods. It also includes regular movement, adequate sleep, and attention to blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, and body weight when appropriate. The objective is not perfection. It is consistency. Because after 60, healthy aging is about much more than avoiding one disease. It is about preserving the abilities that make life enjoyable. You want enough strength to carry your groceries, enough mobility to climb the stairs, enough energy to take a walk with your family, enough cardiovascular and metabolic health to remain independent for as long as possible. That is the environment we are trying to support. And walnuts can be one small part of that picture, not because they are magical, but because nutrient-dense foods can make a healthy dietary pattern easier to build. Of course, even a healthy food can become unhelpful if you use it the wrong way. Now, before you start adding walnuts to your daily routine, there are a few mistakes I want you to avoid. The first is assuming that because nuts are healthy, you can eat unlimited amounts. Walnuts are nutrient-dense, but they are also calorie-dense. A small portion can fit beautifully into a balanced diet, while repeatedly eating large handfuls throughout the day can add far more calories than you realize. The goal is not to eat as many walnuts as possible. The goal is to use an appropriate portion as part of your overall diet. The second mistake is choosing heavily salted or flavored nuts without checking the label. A plain walnut is one thing. A nut product covered in excess salt, sugary coatings, or other added ingredients is something different. If you are watching your sodium intake or trying to reduce added sugar, read the nutrition label rather than assuming every nut product is equally healthy. The third mistake is buying nuts coated with sugar or candy-like ingredients. A package may still have the word walnut on the front, but the finished snack can contain significant amounts of added sugar, syrups, chocolate, or other extras. These products may be enjoyable occasionally, but they should not be confused with a simple, minimally processed serving of walnuts. The fourth mistake is adding nuts without changing anything else. This one is easy to overlook. Suppose you normally eat cookies every afternoon, and now you add walnuts while continuing to eat the cookies. You have increased your food intake rather than improving the quality of your snack. A better approach is substitution. Replace a less nutritious snack with a modest portion of walnuts, perhaps alongside fruit or another wholesome food. And the fifth mistake is believing one food can compensate for an unhealthy lifestyle. Walnuts cannot erase years of smoking. They cannot replace physical activity. They cannot make chronic sleep deprivation healthy. They cannot cancel out excessive alcohol intake or consistently poor eating habits. There is also no scientifically established prostate dose of walnuts that guarantees a particular result. That is important because you may see very specific numbers promoted online as if eating exactly that amount produces a predictable prostate benefit. Real nutrition is rarely that precise. Instead, think in terms of consistency and overall dietary quality. Choose simple nuts when possible. Pay attention to portions. Read labels. Use walnuts to replace less nutritious foods rather than simply piling them on top of your existing diet. And remember, the walnut is only one small piece of the picture. And there is one mistake that has nothing to do with what you eat. It has to do with what you ignore. There is an important point we need to pause on. Because eating well is valuable, but it should never become a reason to ignore changes in your body. If you are over 60, you may notice urinary changes and think, that is just part of getting older. Sometimes it is related to normal age-associated prostate enlargement, but you should not automatically assume that. For example, if you increasingly have trouble getting your urine started, if your stream has become noticeably weaker, or if it stops and starts during urination, those are changes worth discussing with a healthcare professional. You may also feel as though your bladder has not completely emptied after you finish. Perhaps you leave the bathroom and, only a few minutes later, feel that familiar urge again. Another common concern is nighttime urination. Getting up once during the night may not be unusual, but if you are repeatedly waking 2, 3, or more times, especially if this is a new or worsening pattern, it is worth finding out why. And remember, the cause is not always the prostate. Bladder changes, medications, diabetes, sleep problems, fluid intake, and other conditions can contribute to frequent urination. That is exactly why an evaluation can be helpful. You want to know what is actually happening rather than guessing. There are also symptoms that deserve particular attention. Blood in your urine should be medically evaluated. Blood in semen should also be discussed with a healthcare professional, particularly if it persists or occurs with other symptoms. Pain or burning when you urinate should not simply be dismissed as aging. Persistent discomfort in the pelvis, lower abdomen, or related areas also deserves appropriate evaluation. And if you suddenly become unable to urinate at all, that is different from simply having a weak stream. Acute inability to urinate can require urgent medical attention. Now, I want to reassure you about something. Having these symptoms does not automatically mean you have prostate cancer. Many urinary symptoms in older men have causes that are not cancerous, including benign prostate enlargement. But symptoms alone cannot tell you exactly what is happening. That is why evaluation matters. Prostate health decisions, including whether and when screening is appropriate, should be individualized. Your age, family history, personal risk factors, previous test results, symptoms, and overall health can all influence the conversation. So rather than waiting until a problem becomes impossible to ignore, bring persistent changes to your doctor. And this is where the message about walnuts becomes clearer. A healthy food can support a healthy lifestyle, but it cannot examine your prostate, identify the cause of urinary symptoms, or replace medical care. The smartest approach combines both. Make supportive choices every day and pay attention when your body tells you something has changed. So if walnuts are only one small piece of the puzzle, what does a genuinely prostate-friendly lifestyle look like? If you take only one idea from this video, let it be this. Prostate health is not about finding one magical ingredient. It is about creating healthy habits that support your whole body over time. The first habit is to build your meals around minimally processed foods. Think vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, nuts, and nutritious sources of protein. You do not need a perfect diet. Instead, try to make these foods the foundation of most meals. They provide a range of nutrients and help create a dietary pattern that supports cardiovascular and metabolic health. And remember, this is where walnuts can fit. A modest portion can be one part of that pattern rather than the entire strategy. The second habit is to keep moving. Walking is an excellent place to start. If your health allows it, regular strength training can help preserve muscle as you age, while mobility exercises can help you maintain flexibility and function. You do not have to train like an athlete. The goal is to keep your body capable. Also, pay attention to how long you sit. If you spend hours in a chair, look for opportunities to stand, stretch, and walk throughout the day. The third habit is maintaining a healthy waistline. This is not about chasing a certain appearance. Abdominal fat is associated with changes in metabolic health, including insulin regulation and inflammation. Maintaining a healthy weight, when appropriate for you, can support many systems at once. If you need to lose weight, think gradually. Small, sustainable changes are generally easier to maintain than extreme diets that you abandon after a few weeks. The fourth habit is protecting your sleep. Sleep is not wasted time. Your body uses it for recovery and regulation. Poor sleep can affect appetite, blood sugar regulation, cardiovascular health, and energy levels. And there is a frustrating cycle that some older men experience. Prostate or urinary symptoms can wake you repeatedly, while poor sleep can leave you feeling exhausted the next day. If nighttime urination is regularly disrupting your sleep, do not simply accept it as unavoidable aging. Discuss it with your healthcare professional. The fifth habit is being thoughtful about alcohol and highly processed foods. This does not mean you have to become perfect or never enjoy your favorite foods again. It means understanding that frequent excess can work against your health goals. Look for substitutions. Choose a nutritious snack more often than a heavily processed one. Drink water when appropriate instead of automatically reaching for a sugary beverage. If you drink alcohol, follow moderation guidance appropriate to your health and medications. The sixth habit may be the most important. Keep medical checkups on the calendar. Nutrition and exercise support your health, but they cannot tell you why a urinary symptom is occurring. If you notice changes in your urine stream, increased nighttime urination, difficulty emptying your bladder, pain, or other persistent symptoms, bring them up. And when it comes to prostate evaluation or screening, there is no single approach that fits every man. Your age, family history, personal risk factors, previous results, symptoms, and overall health all matter. Have an honest conversation with your healthcare professional about what makes sense for you. Put these 6 habits together, and you get something much more powerful than a single food. You get a lifestyle designed to support strength, mobility, cardiovascular health, metabolic health, sleep, and informed medical care. That is the kind of strategy that can serve you for years, not just for the next few weeks, without turning your routine into another complicated health project. Now let's bring all of this down to something you could actually do tomorrow morning. Now let's make this practical. If you enjoy walnuts and they fit your diet, you do not need a complicated routine, special recipe, or expensive supplement. The goal is simply to make them part of normal meals in a sensible way. Start with a modest portion that fits your individual calorie and nutrition needs. You do not need to eat a huge handful several times a day to get nutritional value from walnuts. You could add some chopped walnuts to oatmeal in the morning. You could mix them into plain yogurt with fruit. You could sprinkle them over a salad at lunch or keep a measured portion available when you want a satisfying snack. And one of the simplest strategies is substitution. Instead of reaching for cookies, candy, or another highly processed snack every afternoon, you might choose a modest serving of walnuts with a piece of fruit. The goal is not simply to add more calories to your day, it is to improve the quality of what you are choosing. When possible, choose plain, unsalted, or minimally processed walnuts. Check the label, especially if you are managing your sodium or added sugar intake. And remember that walnuts are not appropriate for everyone. People with nut allergies should avoid them, and anyone with specific dietary restrictions or medical conditions should consider those factors before making significant dietary changes. There is also no need to assume that a walnut supplement is better than the whole food. Supplements can be concentrated and do not necessarily provide the same overall nutritional package as eating a variety of whole foods. Most importantly, do not turn walnuts into a dramatic protocol. There is no magic number that guarantees prostate protection. Think consistency rather than perfection. A modest serving incorporated into an already healthy eating pattern is far more realistic than following an extreme routine for a few weeks. But before you start thinking walnuts are the answer to every prostate problem, let's clear up the 5 biggest myths surrounding this topic. At this point, you may be wondering whether walnuts really deserve all the attention they receive. So let's separate the useful information from the myths. The first myth is that walnuts can shrink an enlarged prostate. There is no established evidence that simply eating walnuts can shrink BPH or benign prostate enlargement. Walnuts may be a nutritious addition to your diet, but they are not a treatment for an enlarged prostate. If urinary symptoms are bothering you, the answer is proper evaluation and, when appropriate, evidence-based treatment. The second myth is that eating walnuts prevents prostate cancer. That claim goes too far. A healthy diet may contribute to overall health and may be associated with a lower risk of certain chronic diseases, but no single food can guarantee protection from cancer. Prostate cancer risk involves many factors, including age, genetics, family history, and other individual characteristics. The third myth is that more walnuts automatically means more benefit. It does not. Walnuts are nutritious, but they are also energy-dense. Eating several large handfuls every day does not create a special prostate advantage. It simply adds more calories. The goal is an appropriate portion within the context of your overall diet. The fourth myth is that natural means completely risk-free. Natural foods can still cause problems for certain people. Nut allergies are an obvious example. Walnuts may also need to be considered alongside your calorie needs, dietary restrictions, and other health circumstances. Natural is not another word for perfect for everyone. And finally, the fifth myth may be the most important. If you eat healthy, you do not need prostate checkups. That is simply not true. Healthy eating, exercise, and other lifestyle habits can support your overall health, but they cannot replace medical evaluation. If you develop persistent urinary symptoms, pain, blood in the urine, or other concerning changes, talk with a healthcare professional. And decisions about prostate screening should be individualized based on your age, risk factors, family history, symptoms, and previous medical information. So the real message is much more balanced than the headlines. Walnuts can be a nutritious food. They may fit beautifully into a healthy aging diet, but they are not a miracle cure, and they should never distract you from appropriate medical care. Once you understand that distinction, you can make better decisions without fear, hype, or unrealistic promises. So what should you actually remember when you finish this video?